All right, let's kind of get back underway here.
Okay, this works.
Okay, I want to welcome both Jean and Alex into the stage. Both have again spoken at GELF before. I really want to appreciate that where they have been sharing their experience in their long and global careers. So we're going to just kind of get started here with our session here. We've got, if we can pull up the slides, please. There we go, the beautiful headshots there. So let's start with John. Can you just give a self-introduction and tell us a little bit about the experience?
Sure, yes, nice to meet you everyone. Thank you for attending GELF today. My name is Jean Kany. As you can hear, I am French, or maybe you cannot hear it, and that would be a lie, but I will pass it. I work at Citcon. We're a payment company. We process over 100 payment methods. I'm actually based in New Jersey, so I took the train this morning. So if some of you are in New York, happy to meet you guys anytime. So Citcon, if you go to the next slide, we offer payment methods all over the world. So it's not just US, it's also Mexico, Korea, China, Japan, India, etc., Vietnam. So the way we do it is not just about traditional payment methods, it's also about the local and alternative payment methods. So don't think just Visa and MasterCard. Think about Alipay, KakaoPay, Mercado Pago, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, please, Alex.
Okay, thanks, Jim. This is a great, small, intimate setting, so I hope you have a conversation versus just a lecture here. And I always tell people, whoever has the best question wins a prize. Seriously, I have one item from my last favorite client, Glossier, so you're the best question. And you'll be the judge, the best question. I'll give you this prize, which is priceless. Okay, so I'm here today because I've had a long career in e-commerce and technology. I used to be a vendor for 15 years called NetKey. We did retail software, which we sold to NCR. Then I went on to the retail side at RalphLauren.com in 2005 2010. And luckily got into Tory Burch for 7 years, which had about 13 Ralph Lauren people. And what I'm going to focus on today are some of the lessons from growing global e-commerce at Tory Burch and payments, which I love e-commerce, I love technology, and I really love payments because nothing happens to our customer or guest until he or she hits the buy button, right? And it's really an underrated part of the whole journey, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We can talk about some other clients here, but that's where I'll stop.
Yeah, let's just kind of start with Alex. You have had a fabulous career in doing global work for global brands. I know that you've shared some of these experiences in the past, but so much has changed, right? I mean, back to and perhaps you'll talk about this just in going through some of the case studies. But how do you kind of look at a global opportunity these days, right? And think about what would you do differently in some respects?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I want to show you what we did at Tory Burch, and the reason I'm here is because I've probably made more mistakes in global e-commerce than anyone in this room or in the group since our period of 2010-11 till when I left at 17 is different than today. I mean, with COVID and the changes. But this is actually the slide that I used with the board of directors in 2011 in order to get money to go global. And in the room was Tory and her ex-husband Chris Burch and the whole crowd. And on top, we were smart enough to say, let's ship from the U.S. cross-border, and what countries can we ship to? And we didn't have the providers here today globally in eShop World. There were others out there, but we just picked some strategic countries. And then on the bottom, we said, where do we want to be with our warehouses? And did a 5-year plan. We showed the board an Excel sheet and a small investment. We did it for under 7 figures, which was remarkable, and executed on it. But the the first thing we did was analyze the footprint of our retail and wholesale. We have licensees in a couple countries like Japan, South Korea, and I'm doing this now for another large billion-dollar distributor, which they have 10-year licenses, which is tricky to launch direct to consumer when someone has exclusive. Number two, what we didn't do really then, we kind of winged it based on where we thought our customers were. Today, I would use really much more Google Analytics and data to show where do I go first and where do I go second, and set priorities on a crawl, walk, run. The other thing we did, which was smart, is before we went international or cross-border, we got our US site in shape. And I told my buddy there in the back, in 2010, if you send out an email on Tory Burch, the site would crash. It was an old ATG Oracle system, so we had to re-platform before we even thought about going globally international. It was just chaos. And our warehouse was a challenge, and our order management didn't work. They oversold. So if you can't get that right, then don't go global. We got our logistics center right. And then we also looked at what are called reshippers. Anybody know what reshippers are here? Well, I don't think we talk about that at all, do we?
Well, we haven't talked about it more recently. The freight forwarders and such, it
Yeah.
used to be a huge part of it. We would know, basically the zip codes in the country that had an extraordinary, kind of volume of, packages, clearly destined for some overseas destination. So, it's a model that certainly was, in the earlier days, right, of cross-border was more popular.
Yeah, it's still popular. I mean, myus.com down in Sarasota or others, they buy, if you're in another country, the US has the most and the best assortment of products and the best prices, bar none. So they set up an account on these reshippers, they come in and buy Ralph Lauren, Tory Burch, they ship it to a big warehouse in Sarasota, they put them in the mailboxes and they ship it out in a big DHL crate, TV sets, all kinds of things go out. And that's a big market. That you'd be surprised how big it is, especially for luxury goods.
Alex, before you move on from that, just for a second, I'm curious, when I look at your lessons learned there, who should be running this inside of an organization, right? I mean, when you're thinking of international e-commerce, we see the greater complexity now. I mean, kind of this question came up even during the live streaming, conversation, earlier. Who should kind of own it internationally? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's a great question because technology and digital innovation is really an org question, right? So if you want to go from 1 million to 100 million, the org structure is 100 million to a billion, or 1 billion to 5 billion, or 5 billion to 10 billion. It's very different org structures. So when we started at Tory, we had marketing own everything. As we got to 200 million, we split up and then technology took over pieces of it. But global e-commerce takes a village to get done. So you have to have a strong relationship with your accounting and finance team and tax team, legal, international. So everyone gets into the sport of designing the strategy. So you have to have a really strong strategy first before you move forward. Yeah.
So the answer it evolves over time, essentially, especially as the business scales and likely the complexity that.
Yeah, it's not technology shouldn't own it, digital shouldn't own it. I think it's really, what I like to see is that the governance set up where you have the executives and a steerco of the key departmental heads and then representatives underneath the steerco. So the first thing I do is ensure that there's a large and agreed upon corporate governance and then work streams for executing global digital or payments.
I think it's almost like a 3D type of org chart where you have like all the different functions, like digital transformation, payment, logistics, etc. And then you have like a global e-commerce team that is kind of coordinating all this in the back, right? So it's almost like a 3D org chart in my opinion.
We've seen that same kind of structure, when we've looked at again what can be centralized within the headquarters. But I think so much of that comes back to again how much autonomy the regions have, right? We've seen that so it is one of these cases where I think having some strategy, probably technology at the center, best practices, but typically, and Alex, you might be able to verify this. Typically, the P&L still can be owned within a region, right?
Yes, I think, Jim, what you're saying is who's the decider? I mean, in most companies, they would have the steerco, and then, let's say it's the VP of finance that may own the P&L, or the VP of digital or e-com. It depends how big the company is. But it takes a village, and the international teams are on 50% of the telephone calls. We share here and where I'm working today, calls in the morning with Asia and calls at night with Asia and morning with Europe. So you end up having lots of calls and a lot of global people here. So you become an expert in balancing whose turn it is to get up early.
Yeah. No, that's great. Let's keep going forward. And I've got a few great examples of your payments history as well.
Yeah, one question you should say is, did we execute this plan? The answer is we got 80% of it done. 80% of it done. You mentioned it earlier, the rest of Europe shop is something we did think was innovative, where we did 4 countries first. Everyone does Germany, Italy, France, UK, right? And then we did a rest of Europe. And then we took back Japan, which was really complicated to do we had Mitsubishi as the licensee. But we partnered in Korea with Samsung, because the buyers, and you're going to talk a little bit about this, in places like Korea that use corporate cards, and in Hong Kong, Shanghai, that came later than this time period, 2005. But go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So it sounds like you licensed into markets that you didn't necessarily want to play directly, and then I'm guessing you took those learnings, or you said, yeah, actually there is a real serious business there, let's do it ourselves. Is that the logic that you follow?
Yeah, we had no licensees in Europe, right? But in Asia, it's really good to have a partner to learn the market in Japan, China, Hong Kong. We were direct in China, but we also had partners. So then, like any brand 101, over time we say, when should I take back that brand? And it's a big, big deal for all channels, retail, wholesale, and direct.
So what were the factors of you taking it back in Japan?
Well, I probably can't talk about it, but it's basically, can we meet the customer experience at the level that we want it to be at? I think, that tends to drive a lot. It's not necessarily the P&L, because the P&L's always come down. When you get it down there, it's often the same, but can you really give that customer experience? Whereas, big fan of Samsung, they did a great job in Korea. And you probably have licenses where you are. Okay, so out of these learnings, I think the org chart would be a good thing to have next time, how you would set up the org. Because how do you make change and transformation in complicated organizations? And that's just a really favorite topic of mine. But to boil it down, if you have to leave in 5 minutes, I love flywheels. This is more like a pinwheel. I'm not a very good graphics person, but I throw these into these buckets, and maybe you have a different point of view. But I think the number one thing is checkout experience. This is not a payment session. This is a customer experience session, because it's got to touch all points of transactions, whether or not someday you're using TikTok or Instagram or your checkout. Regions and countries, you've heard everybody talking about localized payments. You're going to talk a bit more about that. Integration with all your systems. And I never do business with a vendor today unless I have C-level support with that vendor. It doesn't matter if I'm a $100 million company or a $5 billion company. If I don't have some kind of C-level support, I pass. Transparent cost rates and fees, and this is one area that techies and digital people tend to miss. They think, close your ears, they think that the rate card is fixed, right? The rate card is fixed from the big companies here, or they're not fixed. If you're a big company, they're negotiable. And those basis points, BPSs, are crucial to EBITDA. And you just have to be willing to have a good bake-off to make sure they're going to keep. Oh, you're listening. Okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely listening.
And they're all transparent. Okay, last thing, all the alternative payments, buy now, pay later, is exploding because younger generations don't want to pay full boat. They do Afterpay for Klarna. Gift cards I just love, especially this time of year. Gift card gifting strategies tied into loyalty. I don't have company cards on here, but if you're big, company cards are a home run because you get data. Sales and tax is simple. Partner fit, and then reporting and legal, so that my accounting team can reconcile their books faster today than can with the current providers, and then risk and then representative cyber liability insurance, since the biggest risk you have with our colleagues here is the data breach, right? Does this make sense? This is boiled down into one slide.
No, it's a great slide, Alex. You know, again, just it almost becomes kind of the framework, like or a checklist, that any brand should probably be kind of thinking through all these aspects.
Before we get into our expert, the lessons learned is, if we were to do it again, you asked some lessons learned, we should have done Asia first instead of Europe. At that point in 2011, 10, Europe was sort of in a flatline growth area, whereas China was exploding, and Japan was exploding also with luxury goods. They're the biggest market, 3x of North America, 2 to 5x of Europe. We've heard in other sessions about how Asia is a challenge. And that's a really hard chart to see the breakdown. I think Deborah had a great slide on what payments there are in Asia, which I think is representative, but certainly you've got to offer the payments that the customers use. If they don't, 70% of the customers that don't see their payments on that site walk away. So you spend millions on Google, you don't allow their localized payments, they don't convert. And that's changing rapidly around the world with mobile and QR codes and all kinds of fun things. So I'll stop there.
Does the requirement to issue FATCA in China, does that complicate things significantly, or do you outsource that?
Could you say that again?
Sure, so just having to issue like FATCA, am I saying that right? Yeah.
I'll let you. Oh, payment by.
Yeah, like the Chinese invoice that you need to have. So I think.
It's heavy on paper, right? I think it's a requirement.
Yeah, I think they're starting to digitize that. I'm not. I lived in China, and I remember this particularly well because it was definitely a pain point. Like the 3-layer paper with. I even had to make a stamp. Like literally have a stamp with my name, Chinese name, which makes no sense. It's not my legal name. But so I think they're digitizing that. But I think those payment options, they don't take care of the FATCA for you, right? That's a separate thing. But the good thing is, it's I would say, the Chinese government, why they have FATCA, it's because they want to attract tax. Right? And it's almost like someone was asking me about Venmo this morning. With what they did was because people just Venmo each other for the plumber or the cleaning crew, etc. And they don't pay tax on that, right? So that's why they do this. The good thing, why WeChat, Alipay, for example, were allowed also so easily outside of China is because the government is like, oh great, if I have someone buying a Lamborghini in the US when they're not supposed to make that much money, right, then I'm able to track all this, right? So digital payments help. That's why every government in the world loves digital payment compared to cash. But no, it does not solve the FATCA issue. Yeah.
So solutions such as yours does not offer that type of service, is that right?
That's right, yeah, that's right. But what you're doing is, if you're a US company and you're selling to China, for example, right? That's you also have different rules. You do not necessarily need a FATCA.
Right, only if you have a
local entity, exactly. Right, and that's one of the trick where where's the ideal, right? Do you want to have a local entity handling all this, or do you want to operate everything from the US, right? So there are pros and cons to both, right? We can talk a little bit about it after, but it depends also on the size. It's anything that is under probably $1 billion, probably you want to try to operate from the US most likely. Above 1 billion, you probably want to look at local entities, but it also depends, on do you have distributors locally, etc. So there's a lot of different things. It's not that simple. But yeah, for the FATCA thing, it's if you're doing business from the US, then you're good.
Yeah, and we're not talking about Europe, but certainly payment by invoice is really big in Europe, and there are a lot of providers today that automate the whole process. Germany is great. You can sign a check in a restaurant in Germany, and they'll mail it to you. And the default rate is lower than credit cards. So payment by invoice is big around the world. Any questions before I go on?
No, it's a,
Okay, so we've got a lot to cover. Okay, so again, we talked about the North Star, which is the customer experience, which is really, really, really important across everything we do today as digital and technology experts. What is the strategy? Now, a lot of firms zoom through this and do RFPs, but if you don't have your strategy right, then you're not going to be able to execute properly since customers are way ahead and there's a lot of new frontier technology coming out. Just all these things exploding on personalization. It takes a village, and they convert much higher if they can see their payment option. It doesn't mean you have NASCAR-like branding along the bottom of the page. I noticed in one of the last things they had branding on the whole bottom. I'm against that. I don't think you need to do it, but check out, you need to have clearly where it is, and you have to negotiate the size of the pixel, actual size of the branding on each element. So that's a quick summary.
no, that's great. Why don't you pass the clicker over to Jean, and Jean, take us through some of the research and analysis that Citcon's been doing.
Yeah, so for today, I thought, since we talked a little bit about APAC, we can talk about the whole world, but it would take probably another 2 hours. Instead, say, let's talk about APAC in particular. So we actually made a study with payments.com, and I put a QR code if you want to scan it to get access to that study. And so it's quite interesting. So APAC, as you mentioned, right, a lot of people say, hey, we're US company, Western based, let's go to Europe first. But to your point, actually APAC is a much bigger opportunity. 4.3 billion people, right? That's more than 50% of the people on the planet live in Asia, or APAC, I should say. 1.7 billion people have internet access, so that's a very big number in itself. But when you look at it, it's only 1.7 out of 4.3 billion. That means also the growth opportunity is huge, right? This APAC is still booming. Right? And if you have doubts about it, you will see it'll continue booming, especially on the e-com side. One of the challenge, right, is they have like over 50, it's probably more like 100 payment methods used outside of Visa, MasterCard, Amex. That's a key element, right? Now, it's not, to your point in the last slide, it's not about the payment, right? It's about the checkout experience. Why do people want to use other payment options? It's not just because it works better, etc. It's just their preference. It's part of the checkout experience. So especially if you're in luxury, etc., you want to provide that experience. So in North America, actually, e-commerce merchants lose 52% of their APAC sales due to cart abandonment. And we'll talk a little bit about the reasons, but one of the main reasons of that abandonment rate is payments. So just a few numbers just to put it into place. You get 22% of US and UK and Canadian merchants that sell in APAC. 14% of their revenue usually comes from that region, and it's a growing part of their sales. 70% of them expect this growth of their payment volume and their sales in Asia. So definitely something you want to look at. If we look at just APAC, so many countries, it's hard to go after all of them, but let's just look at South Korea quickly. So I do have a question, okay, everybody, who has heard about the car brand Hyundai? Okay. Everyone. Have you heard about Hyundai cars? Nobody. Well, if you look at these, right, first one is a Hyundai card. Samsung also has a Samsung card. Lotte has Lotte cars, and I get so many others. So what's interesting in Korea, all these conglomerates, Samsung, Hyundai, etc., they don't just do their own product, but they also have insurance, banks, etc. They also issue cards, So if you only offer, a payment option, like we are like, hey, they also use Visa, MasterCard, not only, right? If you look at, well, that's obvious, sorry for my last question, but if you look at this wheel, actually only 15% of the transaction in South Korea go through a Visa and MasterCard. You got 18% still through bank transfer, and everything else could be considered as alternative payments, right? And within alternative payment, you have all those wallets, but you also have 30% of those local scheme cards. And the wallets have like KakaoPay, NeverPay, TossPay, Kakao Pay is interesting. It's a little bit, think a little bit about WeChat Pay. You know, it's really a chat app. You can talk to your friends, etc. And then it became kind of a Venmo also, so you could send money to each other. And then it became really a payment option that can offer, you know, on checkout pages. So this is quite important, right? If you look at China, there's no Visa or MasterCard. It's all WeChat, Alipay, UnionPay, right? So if you want, I don't think I'm gonna teach anyone today, right? But this is key. Again, you know, Korea, we just talked about it. If you go to Japan, you got a bunch of, you know, other wallets, PayPay, or Rakuten Pay, Line Pay, and so many others. So that brings a lot of complexity. However, it doesn't have to be complex, right? You can actually solve those issues fairly easily. I think, you know, this is basically the rise, right? The rise of those super apps, you know, like Alipay, Kakao Pay, etc. All these are apps that you will see more and more. Right? And you start even seeing some in the US, right? Look at Venmo or Cash App or all these guys, or even Karter. These are big, have a big growth.
Alex, you know, I'm just curious to know what your perspective is on super apps. It was interesting to hear Deborah just say again, you know, that hasn't translated back here. But you know, in your experience, you know, in dealing with Asia and such, you know, has that been a positive experience? You know, to kind of look into super apps.
It goes to your question about licensing or licensing.
Use mic.
It goes to your question earlier about the licensing, which is in these markets of South Korea, example, it's really a large percentage are coming through these cards, these membership cards or these company cards, and because it's again tied into loyalty points. And men and women just love the loyalty points, and they just will not give them up. So they're going to keep these cards. So maybe you call them super cards. They're super apps. Super apps, I think it was more of a China term, and certainly everybody's here TikTok is thinking about that.
Well, I know that we had hoped to kind of get into some of the Karter and stuff, but unfortunately I'm getting the signal that we are out of time. But I do want to just kind of get, you know, a last word in, you know, from both of you guys. And again, you know, thinking of Asia Pacific, Jean, you know, the Citcon business, obviously, that's your stronghold. You know, what are the trends you're watching there that, you know, like the GELF community should be watching? Same kind of question for you, Alex.
Yeah, I think what we are looking at every day is what is a new app, you know? And you mentioned just TikTok, for example. So who knows, right? I don't think TikTok will launch their payment, but who knows? They could do that, right? Facebook has tried to launch their payment wallet for a while now. We can see it, you know, with Kakao Pay or WeChat Pay, or but again, you know, even since we talked about PayPal is trying also to become a super app. I don't know if you saw, but now you can actually use the PayPal app to pay in some gas stations directly, right? So you don't need a gas station app. You just use your PayPal app directly, and it unlocks the pump. So I think it's hard to keep up. There's no way, right, for a merchant to keep track of that, right? So you need to find a partner, basically, who will be able, or multiple partners, who will be able to keep an eye on this for you, help you identify which one are critical for you. Not everybody needs buy now, pay later, for example. As hot as it is, not everybody needs that. In which country, etc. So that's what our focus is trying to keep up with this market. I was at the conference last week, and I have a slide showing the evolution of payments. And so it's like basically a flat line until like 2010, and then it goes into like this massive tree, and it's just even I don't know all these payment options. So yeah, keep an eye on that. Find a partner or multiple partners who can help you with this.
Alex, how about yourself?
What's amazing is coming here. I think I was here 3 years ago, right? So see things change because technology changes every 90 days. So what do you do if you're a retailer or brand? You've got to move quickly. Yet, as I said, get your U.S. strategy right and really pick tech-forward partners who have a very agile API-rich integration, so it's really quick and easy. When we did Europe, we had to have a contract in every country. The CFO had to sign a letter, give their driver's license, right? And today, my assumption is a lot of the more tech-forward payment part partners. You click a button and you're on. You can do A/B testing. And what becomes really important to try is A/B testing, and then you see trends. For example, we noticed in 2017 that our customers were using Amex. And we said, wow, that's great. So we went to Amex and said, let's be part of your cash back program where you come in and if you register at the company, you get an extra, 10%. It just added another $1 million of revenue, which we needed. So this payment data becomes really a good part of your customer data and your customer stack.
Well, with that again, and Alex, Jean, thank you very much. I encourage anyone, who's interested in some of the Citcon, research to talk to Jean afterwards. A lot of great information there, along with other things that they've been doing as well.
Any other questions? Because we have to award the best question of the session.
Yes. Well, I think Michael may win,
Wait a minute, we got a question.
Really
Got
don't
one in
know.
the back, hold on.
Yeah.
Alice.
So over your experience at Fourier elsewhere, how did you, or what did you think was most important for getting buy-in to invest more in international?
I think that the data is key, and especially with an omni-channel customer, because digital was much cheaper to put in, build a $1 million store, right? So leading with a really simple business case and strategy and backing it up. And these are board level decisions. So first you get your leadership team, the executive team to approve it, and then maybe you're lucky enough to be at the board meeting where they approve items over X dollars, but and making sure that you have buy-in from a large cross-functional team.
Excellent question. Sorry, Michael. So I think, Alex has a fun little, product that he wanted to kind of gift, to someone here. So thanks guys, both very much, and I will ask our next, speakers to kind of join me up here on stage.
Thank you very much.